but also other creative processes began to be mechanized. There were great factories built, and families, including children, crowded into dark, damp conditions to try and gain their fortune. The great boom in the economy brought on by the Industrial Revolution began to wane in the 1830s. So by the time A Christmas Carol was published, there had been a decade of recession. English society bore its marks well. And it is into this period of darkness and despair that Charles Dickens casts A Christmas Carol, a tale with a deeply Christian core. As is the case with last week's film, my arguments regarding A Christmas Carol are not that it is allegorical, but rather that it pulls on elements of Christianity, elements of hope in the face of the mess that is this world. To lift that dreary veil just a little bit. And I must say here that I owe a lot of the depth of this presentation to Dr. Linda Freeman. Dr. Freeman is a retired lecturer in Victorian literature at the University of Maryland, College Park, who crafted the adapted staves that you will hear read today by our lovely volunteers. Who were volunteers? And which are read every Advent at my former church, St. Luke's, Bethesda, Maryland. Dr. Freeman suggests that this story, A Christmas Carol, is incarnational, describing that it is only in this world and not the next that we can hope to alleviate some of the misery of our fellow human beings. She also points out that by far the most sustained echo of scriptures in A Christmas Carol is the story of the rich man and Lazarus. The poor man, Lazarus, was starving at the rich man's gate, and we find that story in Luke 16, 19 to 31. And in the afterlife, Lazarus is rewarded, but the rich man, who is in torment, seeks to have someone mourn his 5 living brothers of the torment that awaits him. So a quick recap for those who just came in. The very brief recap is that this story, A Christmas Carol, a little novelette, was published in 1843, which is toward the very end of the Industrial Revolution in England, and there has been a great recession for about a decade. And a lovely professor wrote or adapted these staves that you will hear today to be presented each week in Advent at a church that I used to serve, because she feels the story is very incarnational and it recasts the telling of the rich man and Lazarus as found in Luke. That brings everybody up to speed, hopefully. So, and she commented that in Luke, there's a verse that says, if someone goes to the brothers from the dead, they will repent. And Dr. Freeman writes that only 2 people that she knows of come back from the dead to urge us to repentance. The first is Jesus, and the second is Scrooge's dead partner, Jacob Marley. So Dickens is rewriting scripture, and she feels that's very audacious. So I believe what Dr. Freeman is pointing out is that the tension that we exist in currently in the world is something we need to be mindful of. Just as Father Noah mentioned in the sermon this morning, for those who are at 8 o'clock, and that you will hear in the 10:15. If last week was about the coming reign of Christ, when Christ is to be king and peace and justice will come in completion. This week is about the current reign of Christ, the kingdom here and now. This phrase will likely be familiar to some of you. We exist in a place that is both already and not yet. And as our gospel lesson reminded us last week, there are those who feed the hungry, who give drink to the thirsty, and yet they never realize they are doing so. They pay attention to the world around them and what is happening in God's kingdom here and now. And there are others, like Scrooge at the beginning of A Christmas Carol, who seem to willfully put on blinders. So I invite you to listen carefully to the first two selections provided by Dr. Freeman, meant to correspond with Advent 1 and Advent 2.
Good morning. A second reading, a reading from A Christmas Carol, Day 1, Marley's Ghost by Charles Dickens, showing Scrooge's need for repentance and reform. At this festival season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, said the gentleman, taking up a pen, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provisions for the poor and the destitute, and who should greatly at the present time. Many thousands are in want of common necessities. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comforts, sir. Are there any prisons? Asked Scrooge. Plenty of prisons, said the gentleman, laying down the pen again. And the union workhouses? Demanded Scrooge. Are they still in operation? They are, still, returned the gentleman. I wish I could say that they were not. The treadmill and the poor law are in full vigor, then, said Scrooge. Both very busy, sir. Oh, I was afraid from what you asked, and said first that something had occurred to stop them in their useful support, said Scrooge. I'm very glad to hear it. Under the impression that they scarcely furnish Christian cheer of mind or body to the multitudes, returned the gentleman. A few of us are endeavoring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink, and means of warmth. We choose this time because it is a time of all other, when want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for? Nothing, Scrooge replied. You wish to be anonymous? I wish to be left alone, said Scrooge. Since you ask me what I wish, gentlemen, that is my answer. I don't want to make merry myself at Christmas time. I can't afford to make idle people merry. I help to support the establishments I have mentioned. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there. Many can't go there, and many would rather die. If they would rather die, said Scrooge, they had better do it, and increase the surplus population. The Advent of Reading 2 will be read by us.
Second reading, a reading from A Christmas Carol, Marley's Ghost, presenting a warning from Marley's Ghost about Scrooge's current life will lead. Mercy, he said, dreadful apparition, why do you trouble me? Man of worldly mind, replied the ghost, do you believe in me or not? I do, said Scrooge, I must. But why do spirits walk the earth, and why do they come to me? It is required of every man, the ghost said, that the spirit within him should walk abroad among his fellow men, and travel far and wide. And if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. It is doomed to wander through the world. Oh, woe is me, and witness what it cannot share, but might have shared on earth, and turn to happiness. Again, the spectre raised a cry, and shook his cane, and wrung its shadowy hands. You are fettered, said Scrooge, trembling. Tell me why. I wear the chain I forged in life, replied the ghost. I made it link by link, and yard by yard. I girded it on my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. Oh, captive, bound in double iron, cried the phantom, ages of incessant labor by immortal creatures for this earth must pass into eternity before the good of which it is susceptible is all developed. Not to know that any Christian spirit working kindly in its little sphere, whatever it may be, will find its mortal life too short for its vast means of usefulness. Not to know that no space of regret can make amends for one's life's opportunities misused. Yet such was I, oh, such was I. But you were always a good man of business, Jacob, faltered Scrooge, who now began to apply this to himself. Business, cried the ghost, wringing its hands again. Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business.
So what did you hear? Did you know there was a quiz? I'm also a former teacher. What did you hear in either of those two staves, both from stave 1 of the Christmas Carol, Marley's Ghost? Yes?
That the first time he didn't hear.
Yes.
He just said, let him die.
Both Scrooge and Marley, right? Jacob Marley.
And then Marley had mentioned that he burned each of the links of the chain around his neck. He performed so many bad actions that it just kept raging up in his lifetime.
Yeah, it's not in this stave, but you might remember that he talks about Scrooge having an even longer chain, because Jacob Marley's chain stopped when he died, and Scrooge was added on for another 7 years. Terrible. What did you think?
A sense, especially in the second reading, that what Marley thought was so important was meaningless, and what Marley set aside as what was truly important in the life that he would live, that will drop in the ocean of being eternity, but that the reality is all these other things that we don't. And it would be just as wrong Scrooge ignored first.
That's right. You should have paid better attention, and it's coming to warn Scrooge without directly saying it, that he should pay better attention. Anything else?
The chains are missed opportunities as much as evil doing. Because I'm sure every year people came to their office and asked me for donations, and they always said no. And all the times when they were passing people on the street, and all those opportunities that presented themselves to be good human beings were missed. And so those were part of those were the links, many of the links in that religious change.
So we had, for those who are in the back, that each of the links on the chain are more of a missed opportunity than something done wrong, because each one represents a moment when a choice could have been made to care for someone or do something helpful, and a different choice was made.
And so that goes to what we have done and what we have left undone.
Oh, nice. We had the Lord's Prayer. Yeah. Yes, and also our confession. Yes, thank you.
That being poor was a punishable offense, both then and now.
Okay, yes, that's correct. Being poor was a punishable offense. That was the question about the poorhouses and the jails. And if you did not have enough funding to pay, then you were put in jail, which then you could not earn money. So it was kind of a cycle that was happening. And that happens today as well. Anything else?
Just in the first reading, the total lack of compassion. How did that come to be in this your Lord's life? How did he become so hard?
Yeah, a total lack of compassion in those first readings. We won't hear anything from the ghost of Christmas past today, but it does reflect on how when Scrooge was a child, there was joy and there was consideration and concern for others, and we see how over the course of his life, that the focus becomes on wealth and greed and money, and so we're able to see that slow shift to where it becomes so central, he even loses his partner, somebody that he was hoping to marry, because she says, you care about this more than you care about everything else. That's really good. It raises for me a question. I don't know about you, but if you're driving around Norfolk and at these major intersections, the city has helpfully placed these signs that say, please do not give anything to panhandlers. The city has social services to take care of them. And every time I see one of those signs, and then I see the person right there in front of the sign, I wonder, what do I do? You know, there's a part of me that says, okay, you know, I will one day pay taxes to the city of Norfolk, and one day that funding will help those in whatever programs the city has. And the other part of me says, there's a person right there, and I'm 4 feet away, and I can do something in this moment. And I wish I could tell you I worked out exactly what to do. I haven't. Occasionally I'll have a pack in my car of warm gloves and food and other things that are non-monetary. And some days I just hand them a $5 or $10 or $20 bill. And other days I've just driven on by. And I still don't know what to do. So if anyone has any thoughts, let me know. But I do think that this is exactly what A Christmas Carol and also what our Advent season, and especially Father Noah's sermon today, for those of you who haven't heard it, they're asking us to do. What does faithfulness look like in the here and now? How do we align our actions in a way that Christ calls us to align them? And now we're going to have our second reading from Asa.
Okay, so this is Stave 3. A reading from Christmas Carol, Stave 3, the second of the Three Spirits by Charles Dickens, concerning the dangers of allowing want and ignorance to flourish. Forgive me if I am not justified in what I ask, said Scrooge, looking intently at the spirit of Christmas presents robe. But I see something strange and not belonging to yourself protruding from your skirt. Is it a foot? Is it a claw? It may be a claw for the flesh there is upon it, was the spirit's sorrowful reply. Look here. From the folding of its robe it brought 2 children, wretched, abject, frightful, hideous, miserable. They knelt down at its feet and clung upon the outside of its garments. Oh man, look here! Look down here, explained the ghost. There were a boy and a girl, yellow, meager, ragged, scowling, wolfish, but prostrate too in their humility. Where graceful youth should have filled their features out and touched them with its finest tints, a stale, shriveled hand like that of age had pinched and twisted them and pulled them into shreds. Where angels might have sat enthroned, devil's work, and glared out menacing. No change, no degradation, no perversion of humanity in any grade. Through all the mystery of wonderful creation, has monsters half so terrible and dread. Scrooge started back appalled, having them shown to him in this way. He tried to say they were fine children, but the words choked themselves. Rather than be party to a lie of such an enormous magnitude. Spirit, are they yours? Scrooge could say no more. They are man's, said the Spirit, looking down upon them, and they cling to me, appealing for their fathers. This boy is ignorance, this girl is want. Beware of them both and all their degree. But most of all, beware this boy, for his brow I see that written, which is doom unless the writing be erased. Deny it, cried the Spirit, stretching out his hands towards the city. Slander. Those who tell it ye omit for your fictitious purposes and make it worse, and by the end. Have they no refuge? Resources, cried Scrooge. Are there no prisons, said the Spirit, turning on him for the last time with his own words. Are there no workhouses? Stage 4, The Last of the Spirits by Charles Dickens, showing Scrooge's death to his old self and his reform and repentance. The ghost pointed downward to the grave by which it stood. Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends, to which, if preserved in, they must lead, said Scrooge. But if the courses be departed from, the ends will change. Say it is thus with what you showed me. The Spirit was immovable. Scrooge crept towards it, trembling as he went, and following the finger, read upon the stone of the neglected grave his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge. Am I that man who lay upon the bed, he cried. Upon his knees the finger pointed from the grave to him and back again. No, Spirit, oh no, the finger was still there. Spirit, he cried, tightly clutching at its robes, hear me. I am not the man I was. I will not be. I must have been, but for this intercourse. Why show me this, if I am past all hope? For the first time the hand appeared to shake. Good Spirit, he pursued, as down upon the ground he fell before it. Your nature intercedes for me and pities me. Assure me that I yet may change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life. The kind hand trembled. I will honor Christmas in my heart, and I will try to keep it all year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach, or tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone. In his agony, he caught the spectral hand. It sought to free itself, but he was strong in his entreaty and detained it. The Spirit, stronger yet, repulsed him. Holding up his hand in a last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down to his own bedpost.
Sentence. What did you hear from either of these?
Well, what kind of took my breath away was just the children being named ignorance and want.
The children were named ignorance and want, and she felt that's a bit too much.
Well, it's a warning, those two children, to Scrooge, that's reflected in what happens with the rose of Christmas yet to come. figures it out. And you know, as the story goes, he holds Christmas in his heart and, you know, becomes a very good man. And is fighting against want and ignorance. You know, and supporting, you know, faction in his family, and you know, he's not doing grand gestures, but he's doing small gestures that really count to that guy as opposed to them.
So I'm going to try to sum that up in a few words for everyone at the back. Let me know if I mess it up. But that we have want and ignorance, and they, along with the ghost of Christmas present to whom they cling, are to be a sign, of course, to Scrooge to help to illuminate what is happening in the present in Scrooge's own life. And as the story progresses into the next stave, which we heard parts from, with the Christmas yet to come, we're seeing that change in Scrooge as he starts to begin to hold Christmas in his heart and to kind of push against want and push against ignorance by the small actions that he takes. He doesn't do grandiose gestures, but he does start to care for the Cratchits, and he starts to think about the people who come to his doorstep to ask for money rather than for the folks that are getting thrown in the courthouse. Yes?
Maybe, I'm just going to comment on the thing about children. Maybe he's got ignorance and want disguised as seemingly innocent things that we might overlook because of the innocence that, you know, that we think of as children having. If ignorance and want had been maybe adult figures, it would be more like, oh yeah, of course. But with children, you don't expect it, maybe.
Mm-hmm. That there's a juxtaposition.
It's easy to overlook, I guess, because of the many children.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so there's the juxtaposition and the choice that Dickens did to have ignorance and want depicted as children who were shriveled versus adults. And there's something that hits differently about them being children.
I was thinking in this chapter, it's circumscribed to this chapter, there's the inevitability of the Greek tragedy, that once the notions are set in place, there's an inevitability that the tragedy has to come. And so these children, there's an inevitability about the consequences that they've had until the next chapter starts, or just kind of amazing.
I can't pay you guys enough. This is great. Because you have just made my transition. So, does anybody wonder why bad things happen to good people? Anybody? Anybody have a question? Yeah, we got Jared. Father Jared is very, yes, Andrew?
Basically because humanity allows injustice to prosper.
Yes, you know, again, I can't pay you enough. Thank you so much. So there is a school, there are many schools of theology. There is a school of theology that has this as a kind of thought process or an answer. It is a Barthian school for those who are theology nerds, so Karl Barth, very famous guy. Anyway, he talks about in one of his many writings how when we were created, we were endowed with physical gifts, emotional gifts, and intellectual gifts. And this understanding of when the fall happened, however you think of the fall, that all of those gifts were then touched by sin. And there's a way in which we have released our authority, our mental capacities, our emotions, in a way that they have become greater than the sum of the parts. Concrete example, so you can stay with me. Congress, right? In theory, if you live in the United States and you are having the ability to vote, you can influence your representatives in Congress to create a bill, to change a bill, to do what you want them to do, right? In theory. How easy is that process? Even chose to personify ignorance and want as children, to give a weight to that which is happening. So there was something about our knowledge that we were endowed with in creation that we kind of just put blinders on. And that knowledge just kind of bubbled up into a pile of ignorance, something like that. And that is why, in a way, that we have bad things happening to good people. So night was created. Originally, night was not something that was so cold that people would freeze. It might have just been a coolness, like you feel on a crisp day where you get energized. Rivers were created. There were floods to feed people. Maybe they weren't the kind that would rise to the level of destruction. But over time, with our sin and the capacities that we have being corrupted, those things have changed into things that have become harmful to us in creation. It's just a thought. Yes?
So, in the tradition that I study, the fall is considered the breaking up of what you just discussed. And it has created what is known as the clip-off, the realm of the shells, the shards. And there's the act of everybody that's an act that everybody is responsible to is called tikkun olam, the bringing up of the shards. So we all have a mission to take these shards back up. Even if we have just one little shard, we got to bring at least one little shard back.
You are preaching Noah's sermon today. He's going to thank you. Y'all are just on it. Yes, so for those in the back, the tradition that he comes from is that the fall looks like a breaking apart of something that was created beautiful and holy and whole with a WH. And the fall kind of broke that into pieces. And our current work, our present work, is to lift those pieces up into the new creation that Christ and God and the Holy Spirit is calling us to be. Is that fair?
Fair.
Good. Okay, so now we have our final reading from Diane. Thank you.
And I think I actually lucked out and got the news. Our reading from A Christmas Carol, Day 5, The End of It, by Charles Dickens, depicting Scrooge's joy in having a chance at new life and his resolutions about how to live it. Yes, and the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own. Best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own to make amends in. I will live in the past, the present, and the future, Scrooge repeated as he scrambled out of bed. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. Oh, Jacob Marley, heaven at Christmas time be praised for this. I say it on my knees, old Jacob, on my knees. He was so fluttered and so glowing with his good intentions that his broken voice would scarcely answer to his call. He had been sobbing violently in his conflict with the spirit, and his face was wet with tears. They are not torn down, cried Scrooge, folding one of the bed curtains in his arms. They are not torn down, rings and all. They are here. I am here. The shadows of the things that would have been may be dispelled. They will be. I know they will. His hands were busy with his garments all this time, turning them inside out, putting them on upside down, tearing them, dislaying them, making them perish to every kind of extravagance. I don't know what to do, cried Scrooge, laughing and crying in the same breath, and making a perfect cocoon of himself with his stockings. I am as light as a feather, I am as happy as an angel, I am as merry as a schoolboy, I am as giddy as a drunken man. A Merry Christmas to everybody, a Happy New Year to all the world. Hello there, woo, hello. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well. If any man alive possessed the knowledge, may that be truly said of us and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone.
So what did you hear? It's the last time. The last time, I reconciliation.
Extravagant emotion.
Extravagance, emotions, extravagance of emotions.
He came to realize who he could be.
He came to realize who he could be.
Essentially, he has money and has something to fill it with now instead of just books.
A sense that he has life and something to fill it with now, aside from just books.
And the sense of time, suddenly there's time, this blessing of time, and this sense of place, like I am here, and I have all of this time.
Suddenly there's a sense of time and awareness that I'm here now and I have all of this time to use for benefits. Anything else?
I think everyone has a chance, as he did, to hit the reset button, to go back and not do everything all over again, but to start fresh and go forward. So you can't change what happened, but you can alter and direct the course going forward.
So Margaret was saying everybody has a reset button to kind of do what he did and to reflect on the past, which we cannot change, but to make different choices today in order to create a different future.
On top of his life being filled, it's still to a point where it overflows, and it overflows to a point where it can then fill the lives of others with the actions that he then takes from that point forward.
Yeah, so the choices that Scrooge are making is kind of like from a deep well, and those choices are just overflowing. So that joy and that sense of generosity is just filling more almost than just the immediate people around them. Yeah.
Transformation of self-centeredness to just of the outpouring of love to others.
A transformation of self-centeredness to an outpouring of love to one another. Yeah.
This is kind of a weird take on it, but I've always thought that it's interesting that Tiny Tim's family were able to let Scrooge change. I mean, Scrooge changed, but they let him in because they had been kind of abused by him for a long time, and they accepted that transformation and trusted it.
Yeah, so it's kind of radical that Tiny Tim's family allowed Scrooge to come in, and they allowed him to grow and to change. Sometimes we don't want our relationships to change, right? We want the person to fit in a box. And so for Tiny Tim's family, they allowed Scrooge to become this generous person and to bless them in a way so that Tiny Tim could then live.
But Bob Cratchit always had a heart for him, always forgave him. So he is in some of them.
Yeah, Kate is pointing out that Bob Cratchit always had a heart for Scrooge. We didn't read this section, but there's in the Christmas present, there's a section where Bob says that we need to be thankful for Scrooge, and Bob's wife is like, what? You know, for that man, and he's like, no, we need to, have some gratitude for that which we have been given from Scrooge. And so, Bob is an interesting character in the whole book. And I mean, there are just so many different kind of connections. The Ghost of Christmas Past, they talk about the Ghost of Christmas Past having light that wells up from his head. And, that light just cannot stop glowing. And even when Scrooge takes a cat and puts it in the cat, is like Doraemon's pocket, it becomes like larger than the size of the cat and covers the whole ghost. The light still is shining and can't be broken. That's one thing. And we have the three different ghosts, right? And we understand God to be one God in three persons. There's just a lot of different kind of connections that we see. The God who was and is to come. That happens, yes.
Just on Kate's comment, perhaps, Scrooge is there so that we can see what we don't want to be. I mean, mean, we had, sometimes if everything is all okay, then we don't know how, what to change. So he's gotta be there so that we know we have that contract.
Yeah, Scrooge kind of acts as a mirror for us in our own life, right? Where are we like Scrooge, and where do we need to correct or kind of realign our future course? Definitely. We have about 3 minutes, so does anyone have any questions or concluding thoughts that they would like to say? We give a chance to